I walked into the courtroom, the scent of cheap polyester and desperation already hanging in the air. It's a smell I know well. My robe felt like armor, the only thing separating logic from the circus that was about to unfold. I sat down, the thud of my chair, a gavel in itself, and picked up the case file. Davies versus Chen. Sounded simple enough. It never is. On my left, the plaintiff, Mr. Davies. He had the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind you see on a billboard for a personal injury lawyer you hope you never need. He was wearing a suit that was trying too hard, a size too tight in the shoulders. He looked eager, too eager. That's always a red flag. People with the truth on their side are rarely this cheerful to be in a courtroom. On my right, the defendant, Mr. Chen. He was the complete opposite. He looked at the floor, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He wore a simple, clean work shirt. There was a quiet dignity about him, but it was overshadowed by a deep, palpable fear. He looked like a man who had been caught in a storm he didn't understand. All right, Mr. Davies, I started, not bothering with pleasantries. You're suing Mr. Chen for $3,500, unpaid rent and damages. Let's make this quick. What's your story? Davies puffed up his chest. Your Honor, it's a very straightforward situation. Mr. Chen was my tenant for 6 months. A wonderful man, I thought. But then, the last month, no rent. When I finally got him to leave, the apartment was a disaster. Holes in the wall, stains on the carpet. It was just a mess. I have pictures, of course. I'm just a small-time landlord trying to make an honest living. I glanced at the photos he slid across the desk. Grainy, poorly lit. They could have been taken in any rundown apartment in the country. An honest living, I repeated, my voice flat. The phrase always sounds suspicious when someone says it about themselves. Honest people just live honestly. They don't feel the need to announce it. I turned my attention to the defendant. Mr. Chen, you heard him. You didn't pay rent and you trashed his apartment. Yes or no? Mr. Chen looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and panic. He opened his mouth and a string of words came out, soft and rapid, in a language that was not English. He gestured with his hands, a look of desperate appeal on his face. Davies let out a sigh, loud and theatrical. Oh, here we go, Your Honor. This is what he does. He pretends not to understand when things get difficult. My eyes snapped back to Davies. He pretends? My voice dropped a full octave. Are you a linguistics expert, sir? Did you get a degree in phonetics I'm not aware of? Or are you just making an assumption because it's convenient for your story? The smarmy smile on his face faltered. Well, he seemed to understand just fine when he signed the lease. We'll get to the lease, I said, cutting him off. I pressed the button on my console. Bird, get me a Mandarin translator in here. Now, Bird, ever the stoic professional, simply nodded. While we waited, I stared at Mr. Davies. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence hang in the air, thick and uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat. He straightened his tie. He cleared his throat. I've seen men confess to murder under less pressure than my silence. He was sweating. Good. The translator, a sharp-looking woman named Miss Lin, entered and was sworn in. I had her stand next to Mr. Chen. The change in the defendant was immediate. A flicker of relief, of hope, crossed his face. He wasn't alone in the storm anymore. Miss Lin, I said, my tone crisp and clear. Please tell Mr. Chen that he is in a court of law, but he has nothing to fear as long as he tells the truth. Ask him my question again. Did you fail to pay your last month's rent to Mr. Davies? Miss Lin spoke to him in calm, flowing Mandarin. Mr. Chen listened intently, then responded, his voice still low but now firm. Miss Lin turned back to me. Your Honor, he says, no. I paid him. I always paid in cash, just like he asked. I looked at Mr. Davies. The color was draining from his face. Cash, I said, letting the word hang in the air. Well, isn't that convenient for you, Mr. Davies? No paper trail. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. You have a ledger, I presume, a record of these cash payments? He stammered, of course. It's in my office. I didn't think to bring it. You didn't think to bring proof of payment to a lawsuit about non-payment? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. What did you think you should bring? Your winning smile? Let me give you a piece of advice, sir. In my courtroom, a smile is not evidence. I turned back to the translator. Ask Mr. Chen if he ever received receipts for these cash payments. The exchange was quick. Miss Lin's face was grim. He says he asked for receipts many times. Mr. Davies always said his printer was broken or that he would mail it later. He never received a single one. The picture was becoming clearer now, painted in shades of greed and exploitation. Davies saw a man who couldn't speak the language, who probably didn't know his rights, and saw a walking ATM. My jaw tightened. There are few things I despise more than a bully. A bully who preys on the vulnerable is at the very top of that list. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, your printer has been broken for 6 months? It's an old machine, he mumbled, refusing to meet my gaze. I see, I said. And I suppose the damages to the apartment were also a complete surprise to you? I picked up his stack of blurry photos. Let's talk about these holes in the wall. Miss Lin, please ask Mr. Chen about the condition of the apartment when he moved in. Miss Lin translated. Mr. Chen responded, his voice growing stronger, more animated. He was pointing toward the photos, shaking his head. He says the apartment was in poor condition from the beginning, Your Honor, Miss Lin reported. He says that large hole in the wall was already there, hidden behind a calendar. He says the faucet in the kitchen had been leaking since the day he moved in. He says he told Mr. Davies about it many times. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, cold smile forming on my face. It's the smile I get when the pieces of a stupid little puzzle click perfectly into place. Mr. Davies, let me ask you a question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Did you, by any chance, bring a bill from a plumber to fix this supposed damage Mr. Chen caused? He paled. He looked like a man who had just been asked to produce a unicorn. No, Your Honor, I fixed it myself. You fixed it yourself, I repeated, my voice a marvel of false sweetness. My, a landlord, a linguist, and now a plumber. You're a real Renaissance man, aren't you? So, you have receipts for the parts you purchased? The copper piping? The sealant? Anything? Or did you just fix this catastrophic leak with the power of your winning smile? He was silent. The silence was an answer. It was a confession. I didn't think so, I said, my voice turning to steel. Let me tell you what I think happened. I think you're a slumlord. You rent out a subpar apartment with existing problems. You find a tenant who doesn't speak the language, someone you assume is too scared or too uninformed to know their rights. You demand rent in cash so there's no record. You never make repairs. And when they finally have enough and leave, you slap them with a bogus lawsuit for damages that were there all along, hoping to squeeze a few more dollars out of them. How am I doing so far? Is this story ringing any bells? Davies opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked like a fish on a hook. I wasn't done. Let's go back to the beginning. The lease. You said he understood it perfectly when he signed it. Let's see this lease. I held out my hand. He fumbled in his cheap briefcase and reluctantly handed over a few sheets of paper. I scanned it. Standard boilerplate nonsense, full of legalese designed to confuse even a native English speaker. Miss Lin, I said, not taking my eyes off the document, please ask Mr. Chen if he was provided a copy of this lease in Mandarin. The question was translated. Mr. Chen shook his head vehemently and spoke. No, Your Honor. He says he was just told, sign here, sign here. He was desperate for a place to live for his family. His family? I looked at Mr. Chen. His shoulders were slumped, but his eyes were now fixed on me. The fear was gone, replaced by a glimmer of fight. You have a family? Miss Lin translated. Yes, his wife and his young daughter. My gaze snapped back to Davies, and if looks could incinerate, his ill-fitting suit would be a pile of ash. The man wasn't just a predator. He was a predator who targeted families. So you had a man desperate to put a roof over his wife and child's head, and you handed him a legal document in a language he doesn't speak and told him to sign it. Is that your testimony? He could have gotten a translator, Davies blurted out, his voice high and reedy with panic. That's his responsibility. His responsibility? I slammed the lease down on the desk. The sound cracked through the courtroom. Listen to me, sir. When you enter into a contract, there's a principle called a meeting of the minds. It means both parties understand what they're agreeing to. What you did was not a meeting of the minds. It was an ambush. You used his desperation and his language barrier as a weapon against him. Do you understand the difference? He just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Let's move on to the unpaid rent, I continued, my pace quickening. Mr. Chen says he paid you in cash. At your request. You say you have no record of it here today. So it's his word against yours? A man who has been consistent and forthright versus a man who is a self-proclaimed plumber with a perpetually broken printer and a very convenient memory. I let that sink in. Miss Lin, ask Mr. Chen how he got the money to pay his rent each month. Another exchange. Mr. Chen's hands were no longer clasped. He used them as he spoke, detailing his life. Your Honor, Miss Lin said, her own voice now filled with a quiet intensity. He says he works 2 jobs. He is a dishwasher at a restaurant in the mornings and he cleans office buildings at night. He says every Friday he cashes his paychecks at the same check cashing place. He would then take the $500 for the weekly rent and put it in a white envelope. He would hand that same white envelope to Mr. Davies every Saturday morning. The detail, the consistency. That's what truth sounds like. It doesn't come in a fancy suit with a smarmy smile. It comes in a work shirt with tired eyes and a story that doesn't change. The same check cashing place every week, I asked? A new idea sparking, yes, Your Honor. I turned to Davies. And where would you meet Mr. Chen to collect this white envelope full of cash? Every Saturday morning. At the apartment, he said quickly. I'd stop by. I see. I looked back to the translator. Ask Mr. Chen if there was anyone else ever present when he handed the money to Mr. Davies. Mr. Chen thought for a moment. Then his eyes lit up. He spoke excitedly to Miss Lin. He says yes. He says his daughter, she is 7. She was always with him on Saturday mornings. He says she liked to draw a little flower on the envelope for the rent man before he handed it over. A little flower. My God. The sheer, simple honesty of that detail was more powerful than 1,000 sworn affidavits. I felt a knot of anger tighten in my chest. This creep wasn't just trying to cheat a man. He was trying to erase the memory of a little girl drawing a flower on an envelope for the rent man. I looked at Mr. Davies. He had gone from pale to a sickly shade of green. He knew. He knew he was caught. The lies had unraveled thread by thread, and now he was standing naked in his own deceit. A flower, I said softly. Then my voice rose to a roar. A little girl drew a flower on the envelope, and you have the audacity to come in here and claim you were never paid? You stand there and you lie about this man, this hardworking man who is breaking his back at 2 jobs to provide for his family, and you try to paint him as a deadbeat who destroys property? I stood up, leaning over the bench. It was a rare move for me, but this case had gotten under my skin. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about dignity. You thought you were so smart, didn't you, Mr. Davies? You saw a man who couldn't fight back in your language and you figured him for an easy mark. But you made one very, very big mistake. I pointed a finger directly at his heart. You forgot that truth doesn't need a translator. I paused, letting my words echo in the silent room. Mr. Chen was watching me, his expression unreadable, but his posture transformed. He was standing tall. I have heard enough, I said, my voice dropping back to its normal, decisive tone. Judgment for the defendant. Your case is dismissed, Mr. Davies, and I'm not finished with you. I was looking directly into his terrified eyes. I am filing a counterclaim on behalf of Mr. Chen for the return of his security deposit, which I am absolutely certain you had no intention of ever giving back. and I am awarding him an additional sum for punitive damages for fraudulent misrepresentation and harassment. Davies started to sputter. But, Your Honor, that's not... Are you talking? I cut him off sharply, because I thought I heard the sound of nonsense. The security deposit was $1,000. I'm awarding Mr. Chen $5,000 in total. That's your penalty for being a liar and a cheat. Maybe it'll teach you that preying on people is bad business. I turned to Mr. Chen and nodded, first at him, then at Miss Lin. Miss Lin, please explain my ruling to Mr. Chen. As she translated, a slow, wide smile spread across Mr. Chen's face. It was like watching the sun rise. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect and gratitude. He said something in Mandarin, his voice thick with emotion. Miss Lin turned to me, her own eyes a little misty. He says, thank you for hearing me. Tell him, I said, my voice softer than I intended, that's my job. I watched them leave the courtroom, Mr. Chen walking with a lightness that wasn't there before, talking animatedly with Miss Lin. Davies scrambled to gather his things, his face a mask of bitter defeat. He didn't look at me. They never do. I sat back down, the adrenaline of the fight slowly ebbing away. People watch this show and they think I'm harsh. They think I'm mean. They don't understand. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to find the truth. And the truth, in this case, was that a decent man was being crushed by a greedy one. It's an old story. The oldest, maybe. My courtroom is one of the few places where that story is not allowed to have an unhappy ending. Not on my watch. I picked up the next file, Johnson versus Peterson, a dispute over a dead ficus tree. I sighed. The circus was back in town. But for a few minutes, just a few minutes, the world had felt a little more balanced. And for a man and his daughter who liked to draw flowers on envelopes, it was. That's enough. That has to be enough. It was a good day's work.